1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Crack of the bat. We are back at it, Detroit, City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And Charles, hey.
It hasn't been like 8 weeks.
Yeah, whatever. People.
It hasn't been. If you're just listening to this and you've gone from episode 110 to 111 in one show.
We talk every day.
Yes, we talk every day. There hasn't been a gap in the show.
There hasn't been a gap. It's just, yeah. But there's a bunch of stuff happening. It's we just lived through Champions Day in 2024.
Yeah.
And there was a big celebration down at the Detroit Historical Museum. And they really ramped it up this year. They invited out some quasi-celebrities.
History included.
Jamie Flanagan included. So there was another podcast, the Detroit History podcast. Tim Kiska, he's a professor at U of M Dearborn, my alma mater, and but he wasn't teaching there when I was there. But he was a free press writer. And they just do Detroit stories, just everything from, Jay Dilla to, Prohibition, just everything, from the Nain Rouge and the fires of the 1800s to, Gordie Howe Bridge. I mean, they do just Detroit stories. But they were launching their new season, and they were talking about the 1950s and the 1960s big time wrestling, focused around the story of the Sheik. And they had the guy who was the Sheik's manager at the end of his career, the Sheik's last manager, and he helped fill in the gaps on the story. But that was it. But they told the story of big time wrestling in Detroit, which is a big deal. Big time wrestling in Detroit was a cultural thing for so many people my age and a little younger. It's really set the tone for the wrestling world that came later.
Yeah.
So just some amazing stuff happened. So they launched their podcast season with that episode. They played the episode, and they had some visuals to go with it and talked about it. And they interviewed the Sheik's manager there and did a Q&A, and that was fun. And then you got some interviews yourself. And then and when they were done talking, there was like a good 100 people in the little auditorium down there. It was fun. And so I was like, they're like, hey, and it's Champions Day, and it's all about 1935, and the museum people brought me up, and I got to talk to those people, and I said, I know nothing about nothing. I go, but I love this story. I love this city, and let me tell you one story. And I talked a little bit about Eddie Tolan.
Cool.
And I go, you want to talk about Detroit and a Detroit icon, and just how iconic this 35 season was that goes unremembered. Did you know that Eddie Tolan scored 6 touchdowns in a high school football game? And so that was kind of my hook, the open and close of it. So I told the Eddie story, and then people had things. And then later there was a talk by one of the curators of the museum talking about different aspects of 35. They hit on Eddie, and then they really focused on the Lions, because the Lions did well this year. And in between that, they invited out, like I said, some quasi Detroit celebrities besides me. Hugh Perkins, Fox 2 retired news anchor, just iconic dude.
Yeah,
seriously, Hugh is good people. And then Mickey Redmond, who won 2 Stanley Cups with the Oilers, I want to say.
But he's been Detroit's announcer for
forever. But he was a player, and so he won 2 cups, and then played for Detroit, and then has been the Mickey Redmond's been the announcer here in Detroit forever. And then the Detroit Pistons, they had the announcer for the Detroit Pistons, Greg
Kelser.
Kelser.
Yeah.
Greg was there, and they have like a walk of fame, and they put their hands in cement. But the thing was, So I was there and I did my bit, and I was just going to hang out and pass out flyers and talk to people and had our banners up. And I was like, hey, we got a podcast. You should listen to us,
Yeah.
So I was there in the lobby going, hey, be my friend.
Well, maybe some of those listeners are listening to us right now.
Yeah,
so maybe
yeah.
snagged a couple.
I was like, be my friend, please be my friend. And so people were like, I was giving away I was giving away buttons and stickers, and it was fun. But so I was like, hey, they told the museum people, Tracy and her team, I'm like, if you guys need anything, just let me know. I'm here. If I can help in any way, I appreciate you including us in on this, and I'm glad I'm here. And so I'm upstairs passing out stickers and talking to people, and they come up, they're like, hey, Jamie,
remember the thing you were saying
remember that time you said you'd help if we needed help?
Whatever you need.
I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, we're doing the handprints downstairs, but the cement is taking forever, and we got a whole crowd of people. We're bringing a PA down there. Can you come down and fill the time?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? Fill the time? And they're like, well, no, like interview each of the guys when they're doing their handprint, or like right before or right after. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can talk to Hugh Perkins and Mickey Redmond and Greg. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that, sure. So I go down there, and Roop Raj is another. He's a current Fox 2 anchor, and he was there, and so I'm going. And it was taking way too long to ready the cement for each guy, because they said they tried it the previous year and they had 4 people they were inducting, and they mixed up all the cement and they brought it out, and but the first batch of cement was already too hard, and it was Chauncey Billups, and Chauncey Billups was trying.
When did they put his hands in cement?
Last year.
And what day?
Not on Champions Day, but just
well, I know we were there for Champions Day. There was like 2 people there.
I know. It was me, you, and Chauncey.
Yeah. No, he wasn't there.
No,
I would have loved
wasn't.
that. Chauncey's one of my favorite players in the history of Detroit sports.
But
why did I get to meet him?
I know, but he couldn't put his hands in it. He goes, it barely made an impression, so he had to come back another day and redo them.
I'm curious to know what day they did all that.
Yeah, it wasn't Champions Day. It was around their gala. They do it around their gala, their fundraising. So the celebrities are there for the gala.
Sure.
So they wanted to make sure the handprints worked. So we're going to do them one by one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was taking forever. And they're like, oh, it'll be like about 10, 15 minutes in between. I'm like, all right, I can fill 10, 15 minutes. I can do that. Yeah. So I'm there, I'm talking to these guys. It's like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, and there's no cement anywhere. And I'm like, I'm running out of stuff, and I'm like, I'm looking at the crowd. I'm like, all right. Anybody got a question for Hugh?
Yeah. And I'm sure they all sort of want to ask questions,
a couple people. Well, Hugh, not so much. The other 2 guys that people had questions. But each time I said that, it ended up happening with each of the guys. And so when I did it with Roop Raj was like, hey,
yeah,
I got a question. So I was like, hey, thanks, Roop. Yeah, sure. And then other people asked some stuff. So Roop was the only one that asked a question of Hugh. It was cool because I asked Hugh, I go, what was the most challenging story you had to cover while you were here in Detroit? And he was like, well, he totally skirted the question.
Really?
He didn't. And he went and he turned it to his most, because that was going to be my next question, was what was the most moving and touching? And he turned it from challenging to moving and touching. And getting to interview Rosa Parks.
Oh, okay.
And then we talked about the bus being over at the Henry Ford and everything. But and then I was like, I'm out of stuff. I'm out.
Did you tell the audience that?
No, I looked at Hugh and I went, that's all I got.
Oh, God.
I kind of shrugged my shoulders. He laughs. I go, anybody got a question? And Roop,
well, you're standing with a bunch of announcers.
Whatever.
Can't they carry the burden a little bit?
Oh, no, he did. And so
those guys you would have thought would have been all like a
ripped the mic out of
honey or
ripped the mic out of my hand, and he just went. But he went another 5 minutes, and there was another 10 minutes after before the.
Yeah, but those guys do it for a living. The Mickey Redmond talks for 2 hours every single night.
I know. So it was fun. So Mickey was really, really cool.
Did you ask him what his favorite player was?
So no, and I'm trying to get the footage of that, and I'll put it out as an episode.
Yeah, put it out.
Because I don't know. There were people for the museum recording it, but I don't know if they got my whole conversation with
gotcha.
those guys or not. But I got a bunch of pictures, but I don't know if I have the whole video, which would give me the audio. But what I had asked, because like when you go in the Baseball Hall of Fame, you got to pick the hat, you can pick the team, right? And I said, so if you had to pick a hockey stick or a microphone for this tribute today, which would it be? Right. So, and so, yeah, he was like, oh, wow. You know, it's,
what did he choose? Come on.
He just went out. He just
Come
went
on.
out. He went on a rant.
He didn't answer the question at all.
You got to wait for it to hear it.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Right.
That's fair.
So
I want to know what his favorite player is of all the Red Wings players. He's as a broadcaster and also as a player. Those are the questions I'd like to know.
See, who's his favorite?
Who's his favorite? Who he played against, and who was his favorite?
I wish you were
watched
there
on TV.
I didn't ask that.
Oh well, congratulations on the way. Didn't ask the one question I wanted.
Well, but so it was really. But so I'm there, and Roop was like I said, each time I opened to the crowd, Roop Raj was like, "Hey," and then. So I'm there and we're killing time, and the microphone was like way over someplace. So I was moving the microphone, and it was in the middle of these spotlights in the middle of the crowd, and everybody's still just standing there watching this empty space with no concrete, and the guys just kind of dittering around.
Oh, so it was what? I mean, where
waiting.
was it? I thought it was
in the streets. This was in the
so
basement.
You were doing it outside?
No, in the basement, in the streets of Detroit, the basement.
Oh, with the cobblestones and all that. I got you.
So we were down there.
But I thought the handprint thing was outside in the
once they dry.
Oh, then they moved the whole tablet out there. I got you. Okay.
They're up
so
on
it wasn't actually out.
They're up on
the
they're not laying on the ground.
Yeah.
And so as I'm moving the microphone, Roop's like, "Hey, you gonna do a little stand up?" He's like, so he starts heckling me, and I'm like,
"Oh my god!"
I'm like,
well, you got these four legendary announcers. You would have thought that they would have passed the mic back and forth,
and then,
they were having a competition.
Well, I was doing them individually too. But
you know what? Just as a suggestion for next time, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I'm like, Roop, are you heckling me? And he's laughing. Him and his wife, they're laughing at it. And I'm like, are you going to do a little stand up? I go, as a matter of fact, I'm here today because it's Champions Day. And so earlier today, I gave a little talk about Eddie Tolan. And then I told some of the Eddie story again about the 6 touchdowns, but how he was a Cass Tech dude and how he's a Michigan guy. And, just how the Detroit story is like so complex and interesting. That they got to listen to.
What was their
City of Champions?
What was their response? I mean, you mentioned the Tigers, Lions, Red Wings first championships in the same season,
and I said,
what was their reaction?
And people were like, really?
Yeah,
really?
like all the main guys too.
And
Redmond and them too. They don't know anything about it.
And I said, and that is the exact reason why we do the podcast. Look it up. It's Detroit City of Champions. So I was plugging it. It was cool. And Roop was like, oh yeah, that's cool. So, but he was heckling me. I'm getting heckled by Roop Raj while I'm trying to interview Mickey Redmond. I'm like, thanks.
As a suggestion, the next time you find yourself in a room with 4 legendary announcers, next time make it a competition between them. The question I want to know is this: what you do, Jamie? Just a suggestion.
All
okay,
right.
just throw this out
when
there.
This happens again.
Yes.
Right.
What you do is you say the question I've always wanted to know.
Yeah.
Right. I've never been in a situation like this where I've got 4 legendary announcers in front of me all at once. Okay. Yeah. The question that's been unresolved question for all these years is which of you is the best? Right. And then you say each of you gets 5 minutes.
Yeah,
pass the mic.
Yeah.
And you say out announcer each other.
You gotta get a freestyle a little bit.
So you gotta out announcer each other.
But here's the thing. Here's class, right? Here's class. So Mickey, who went first? I think Mickey went first. So Mickey did his handprints first. And then Hugh went. And then Greg, but like I said, there was a good half hour in between each one of like the mix and the cement, right?
But eventually for each one, they called each one of them over to do the hands in the cement, right?
Yeah. And I was like trying to fill the time in between, and so the crowd was thinning, right? And Greg was going last. The crowd really dissipated. So, but here's the class and style that Hugh and Mickey. They didn't my hands are done.
See ya.
I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah.
They stayed. That's
cool.
They stayed while Greg did his handprints.
That's cool.
And I thought that was class. That
is class. So nice. I got in first.
I got my gift bag.
I got my gift bag. I got my hands in the cement.
Later.
I'm immortalized. I got my gift bag.
I'll see you at the cocktail
I'll
party
see you later.
in a month.
I'll catch you.
Yeah.
I'll catch you.
So,
guys
but
later.
I thought that was really
very classy.
really
Absolutely.
classy.
I agree.
So that was Champions Day. Spread the word a little bit down at the Detroit Historical Museum.
Well, and you got to
thrown into a crazy
and you got to
situation.
see once again these people who are Detroit institutions and that who are leveled up as far as being able to speak the language of Detroit and understand Detroit topics and history and all this. And you saw, I mean, I'm speculating because I wasn't there, but I'm bringing, I guess, a question to you, which is that from what you saw, is it fair to say that these guys knew nothing about the 1935 City of Champions season?
Yeah. It was surprising to when I said
it. That's what I'm saying. And it's not an insult to anybody or anything like this. No. It's the reality, which once again demonstrates that we're dealing with a subject matter, which is literally, again, we've made the case already that this is the greatest season in the history of American sport. So once again, we're laying out, demonstrating that the greatest city in the history of American sport is unknown, and thus like the reason why we do the show.
Greg gave me his email, so I'm gonna email him.
Okay, cool.
So I'm gonna have him on. I'm gonna have one of my kids interview him for a school project.
Yeah,
but I got his email. So
cool.
Greg's a really nice guy.
Cool. No,
my arm was hurting because he's so tall. I was like holding him up. Seriously, I'm holding the microphone up. I had to switch hands because it was like anyway. But not basketball. We're talking baseball.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at.
We're talking east of the Mississippi.
We're talking scouting and development and the Tigers and how they developed scouting and development, how they're integral in that in the early days.
Yeah. So I mean the thing to understand, the sort of concept of understanding like why this is important or interesting or however you want to put it is that the entire in the late 1920s, early 1930s, baseball was experiencing a massive fundamental change, and the change is that early 19 all the way through the early 19 to mid 1920s, the way that baseball players were discovered and signed and made their way to Major League Baseball was different than the way from the late 20s and on all the way to this very day. Because in the early to mid 20s and earlier, all the way back through the late 1800s and all this, the way that players were discovered was, in essence, you had these professional town baseball clubs all over the country, and they all every town had a baseball team. And of course, you had small towns, you had medium sized towns, you had sort of next side, sort of large towns. Then you had XXL, triple X, like Detroit and these bigger cities. Yeah. That had enough people and volume and in that to host bigger and bigger crowd, to have bigger and bigger stadiums, to have to basically field bigger and bigger, more expensive teams. And, so it really was all, a lot of it was about money, how much money you could afford to, to buy a player for. And so the original, and I think a lot of times people look at our modern day affiliate major league system the way, because this is what began in the late 20s, early 30s. They look at it as it's kind of how it's always been. It's such a standardized formulaic system. But what's interesting is I like to make the case that the early 1900s, the system before the affiliates, in my opinion, was a better system. And I think so because in essence, every single city in America, every town had a baseball team. And so if you just had a small little rural town, all the local players would play there. And then you'd always, you'd have one guy who was just a super stud, just killing everybody. And obviously way more talented than everybody else in the town.
Somebody'd hear about it. Somebody
the next
tell
town
somebody
up, that was a better, bigger town would hear about it.
Hey, you want to
come play for us?
To Chattanooga?
Yeah. You move over to the next bigger town and there would be guys from around the general area that would be called over to play for these bigger teams. And these bigger teams, kind of like high school or more like colleges, battle for recruitment. That's how these teams were. Every single town in the country would be battling for the players that they could get for their sort of next tier up. And then of course, then there'd be the tiers, sort of a higher level, more, teams above them. And it was the talent, the league system, the makeup of the teams, the caliber of the teams was organic. It was organic. It was teams that like were like, oh, I think I can compete with these big boys, so I'm going to try to get in their league.
Right.
I'm going to try to get into their championship contest, and that's how in team, and that's how they competed. And so when we started to get up to sort of like the mid-tier cities, then those players would actually be sold to the higher level teams. And so it was I think a far more efficient system because it reduced waste. Like if a team like above them was like, hey, I heard about this great shortstop in a level that's, this town that's down the way. We need a shortstop. And this guy's like really good, I hear. So they would like literally grab the guy and plug him in their lineup.
Yeah.
And so all the way up to the major leagues. So a major league team wouldn't necessarily, they would like, oh, well, I heard about this great player. And so they would go buy him and then they'd plug him right into their major league roster, especially if he was like the sort of next town size down.
Yeah.
But again, what ended up happening is Branch Rickey. There's this whole story. Branch Rickey like changed the game. He started buying his own teams and shaping these the minor league system to where the major league teams owned those small clubs below them. And one of the mythologies is that Branch Rickey just had this like light bulb moment where he's like, if I can't, he couldn't compete with the Yankees and this for these like high caliber cost players,
right?
And it was like he had this light bulb moment where he was like, and Branch Rickey was a Cardinals GM, and he's like, he had this light bulb moment where he's like, if I can't compete with the Yankees, if I can't financially beat the Yankees, like by buying my players, then I'm going to grow my players. I'm going to grow my own players. I'm going to have my own teams and I'm going to develop them myself. That wasn't the case. And even in Branch Rickey's own words, and if you read, if there's
like the 70s, grow your own.
Exactly. And so that wasn't the case. Branch Rickey, it was a far more organic thing for Branch Rickey. And really the person who gets left out of the equation all the time was the actual owner of the team. His name is Sam Breeden.
All right.
Sam Breeden's unknown I don't even think he's in the Hall of Fame, but Sam Breeden is one of the most impactful owners in the history of Major League Baseball. And the thing was that the main thing with the Cardinals was that they would sign a guy that was in the minor leagues and say, hey, we're going to let him play like the rest of the season or one more season with this team while he we're gonna give this, we're gonna pay this team money. We're like, we identify this guy in this lower level team, and like next year we want him to play for us, so we're gonna give you money right now. And so then the problem would happen is that player would like become really good in the course of that year, and then they would sell that player to a different team like the Yankees, and so they would therefore undercut the guy that they just identified.
Here's your money back. We got 3 times that much,
or not even give them their money back. So they would like so they were getting the shaft. That was the idea, and so they started buying minor league teams in order to stack those teams with the guys to protect them from the vultures that were poaching their players.
Is this a story of the Toledo Mud Hens?
Not specifically, but so the idea is that all of the, the Cardinals, once they started doing that, suddenly they started having, to what all these other teams identified as like a pipeline, because they'd have all these like studs hanging out at a single team, and they're like, and then they just feed them into the majors, and and the Cardinals had a great run of seasons from the mid-20s all the way through the 1930s, and all these other teams got jealous and were like, well, that's how we got to do it.
They were the innovator with this. The
Cardinals. They were the ones that that created that system, but every other team in the country started identifying, like,
hey, but you're onto something, or we need our own. We need to protect our own.
Yeah, but we need to start doing that too. But the thing is that what evolved out of it was this
damn Yankees.
But what evolved out of it was this kind of mentality that the Cardinals had built this like system. And that wasn't how it started. They didn't start out going, well, we need to develop our own minor league system where they have like young guys that like rise to the ranks. That wasn't how it was. They were trying to protect their guys. They were trying to protect their players from basically getting vultured by these bigger money teams. Right. That was really what it was. And then they just start, then they had, they had slots open on their rosters and like, oh, let's have a tryout and bring guys in. And then they started, and so that's kind of how it started. But what I'm trying to get at is, is that by 1934, this system is still in its infancy. And I kind of equate the concept to when we're talking about scouting and development at this era, it's almost like I equate it to when baseball or when movies went from the silent era to the talkies.
Mhm.
You know, you had these actors and actresses that were stars in the silent era
Yeah.
that suddenly they're like everybody's doing talkies.
Right.
You know, and then the silent era actor gets into the move to the talk and they're like, oh, hey, how you doing? You know, there's some guy, it sounds terrible, you know, and all of a sudden they're like, this guy's you know, he's like, he's not part of the new era. You know, there's a whole new thing.
Right.
And it looks the same to the most part because it's like you know, it's on a movie reel.
Yeah.
But it's different. You know, it's a different sort of technology that everybody else is going with, which is the ability to hear sound.
How does that equate to baseball?
Well, the transition from the previous model where you had the town balls and players were getting bought up.
Okay.
But the main thing is that the scouts who were you still had to have representatives from your team that were out there verifying the players that you were going to buy for your major league club, you know, that you were going to you see guys who are like going from one team to the next and you might read about them in the newspaper, but you still want to send your own person out to like take a look at the guy.
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying is that when Major League Baseball transitioned from the town ball era where the players are just getting bought and sold by the different teams to the higher level teams all the way up. You still had scouts. You still had guys that were going out to check out those players to to kick the tires and make sure the guy, when you get there, like, hey, we just dropped X amount of dollar, a bunch of money on this guy. And you go there and the guy's like some big slob that can't even run around the bases or something, you know, like you got sold a false bag of goods, the newspapers have been hyping them and all this, but the guy, you know, in reality, you look at me like this guy.
They're just trying to fill the bleachers.
Exactly. They're hype merchants and the guy himself is really not that great. And so you got to go and check it out for yourself. So what I'm saying is a lot of these same scouts who were doing that at that moment, and this is one of the sort of interesting aspects of baseball history that really doesn't get talked about, which is this whole breed of scouts that existed in that era. And then when this transition came with affiliate baseball, that they had to, you know, that the teams reoriented how they did business in a different way. Cause now they're actually like trying to fill rosters and they're trying to buy guys and protect them in like lower levels. You know, like they actually had to identify. They couldn't just, you know, like if you had a scout that's like, oh, well, we're just headhunting for our major league team. And now that same guy's got to be like looking for like lower level guys that are like just out of high school or just out of college to fill the ranks and rosters of the lower level minor league system. But the thing is, they had to be good at what they did because those lower level guys would eventually be knocking on the major league door. And if you were crap at that aspect, then your guys would never wouldn't be good enough to get to the major leagues. And so they're terrible. So that's what I'm trying to get. The long and short of it is that's the era we're talking about. Right. These are the scouts. These guys we're talking about. These are the guys who ushered the Tigers from that time before before this, you know, from the old world system to the modern day, you know, to this affiliate system. And so what that means is what we're talking about is the men who laid the foundation for the entire Detroit Tiger franchise, their minor league system for how it exists today.
So Egan is one of these guys?
Wish Egan absolutely is one of these guys.
Wish.
And we'll get to
what
him.
A great name.
Yeah. Oh, it's a fantastic name.
Wish Egan.
His name is Aloysius.
Who is the other?
Egan.
Oh, Aloysius. All right. That's a great old timey name.
Oh, totally.
Sure.
And you can see why they would shorten it to Wish.
So who is the other guy? We were talking about somebody
Billy
else.
Doyle's, who we talked about last show.
All right.
So we're still talking. So the Detroit Tigers, the way
Wish. Hey there, Wish. Come on.
So all these different organizations, you know, I'm sure they had their own different style of systems for like how because you had to have responsibilities for each scout. You can't just have like every scout that's looking all over the country. So each scout has a certain territory of which they're responsible for. And so the way that the Tigers did it was they divided America by the Mississippi River. And so you had scouts to the east of the Mississippi and you had scouts to the west of the Mississippi. That's how they divided their scouting department up, was by that river.
And so all the guys that worked west of there, their first name started with K.
That's most likely the case. Yes. Yes.
Radio
so-
radio stations west.
Is that how it is?
They
Yeah.
start with a K.
I was wondering where
east
you were going with it.
of the Mississippi, they start with a W.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I was hoping you were going to fill me in on the details. I was just going with what you're saying.
All right. That's a
So the guy we talked about on the last show,
insider.
the guy we talked about on the last show was Billy Doyle, who was a big name scout, and the reason we kind of introduced him first was because he's on the Portsmouth flood walls, and he's a major Portsmouth, and we're the biggest Portsmouth fans around. We love Portsmouth.
Yes. If I hadn't deleted that photo, I would show it to you again.
Which one, the Billy Doyle?
Yeah.
Or the flood walls?
The flood wall.
Oh, okay.
I got rid of it.
Well, we got to go back and look at, like, you made me have to go listen to the
previous
question you
episode,
asked. Yes, you got to go take a look.
You got to listen to episode 110.
Yes.
And watch episode 110 on one of the
so Billy Doyle was
platforms.
a big name guy, and he stretched all the way back to the early 1900s, and Billy Doyle was a scout east of the Mississippi. And so the guy we're talking about today is Aloysius. His nickname is Wish Egan, and Wish Egan he's not just like a random scout.
Yeah.
Wish Egan he's the guy that's in charge of the entire department east of the Mississippi. And
east side.
Yes, and so not only is he in charge of east of the Mississippi, his territory. He's got Detroit itself, and so he's actually like scouting Detroit, and like he's like in all the pictures you ever see of Wish, he's basically just basically all these big name like Detroiters, that these guys who are like from Detroit or from Michigan, they're all guys Wish Egan signed. You don't really see many stories about Wish Egan like traveling around like the actual east of the Mississippi. He was like the guy in Detroit coordinating the efforts of all the comings and goings, and in every picture I've seen, he's like right there with Frank Navin, the owner. And so Wish actually, his history with the Tigers goes way back. And so I just a couple briefs. He's born in 1881 in Everett, Michigan. So he's a Michigander through and through.
Right.
And so in 1902, Wish pitched for the Tigers. You're talking about like the second year the Tigers are even in existence. Wish is a pitcher for that team. And so this is the point where, Frank Navin comes in with the Tigers in 1902 as a bookkeeper. So he's like meeting Frank Navin when Frank Navin is like, whatever he is, 19 years old, just as an accountant working for, the guy just like work. He's a low level employee. And so it's not surprising that Wish and Frank Navin may have become friends as just guys who were, with this Detroit baseball team. But so Wish Egan came in 1902 as a pitcher, and he had a very short career.
Right.
Pitched for the Cardinals from 1905 to 1906. And then by 1910, he came back to the Tigers and started working in the capacity of Navin's, because by 1910, Navin is already basically, Navin is already, I forgot if he was the owner of the team at that point or not, but Navin is like the guy. Like Navin, if he wasn't the owner at that moment, he had to have been, because they had been at field by 1912, anyways, Navin's one of the main guys at this point. And so Wish comes back. And so Wish is basically the way that I look at Wish Egan is to say he wasn't just kind of like a scout. He was almost akin to like a general manager of the team. Wish Egan was a main guy that was like a right-hand man to Frank Navin himself. And so this is a guy who, so if he's like the right-hand man of Frank Navin, and Wish Egan worked with the Tigers as a, sometimes he's a coach. He was never the head manager of the team, but he's always like a coach or a, scout or a right hand, sort of a right hand main advisor to Frank Navin. And he worked in that capacity from 1910 through 1951 until he died. So 41 years he worked as the Tigers, one of the main top guys in the Tigers. So very easily can you say that Wish Egan, I don't know every single detail about how. There's not that much information about him, but very easily can you. Look at this picture here. This is the two pictures we have on the screen.
Yeah,
they're from 1934 spring training, and it was Wish Egan who actually ushered the Tigers into getting, because Lakeland, Florida is where the Tigers have their spring training. The first year they were there was 1934, and Wish Egan was the guy who picked out the site. He's credited with saying Lakeland, Florida is where we're going to build our new spot. So anybody that's got that kind of pull inside the organization that's going to decide on like, at least, be credited with saying, Lakeland's where we're going to do this, spring training, and they're still doing it today. I would say as a guy who has had a, significant impact, who at the time had the kind of, who even at that time had, respect, leverage inside the, decision-making power within that organization. And as such, I mean, is an essential cog for the development of the Detroit Tigers. And he's a guy that saw it all from 1910 all the way through 1951. He was there for the entire, from that switch from that town ball model to the affiliate model. And then by 1951, that affiliate model was in full swing.
Right.
I mean, they had the system of developing players is like the affiliate model was like, I mean, by that point it was, well sanitized. And so that's what I'm saying is like, this is a guy that was, that you could very easily credit. And, Frank Navin died in 1936. So Navin had been long passed away for 15 years before Wish Egan's influence ended.
Right.
So, you have this guy, Wish Egan, who
carrying the torch
and brought with him from the earliest days of baseball all the way through 1951. Talk about like a steadying force within this organization, somebody that could, that anybody in this organization could draw on for, imagine you're a young kid in the 1940s or whatever. And you're like, hey, Wish, what was it like in 1902? Pitching for the Tigers in their second year of existence. Like, what was that like? Like you could draw on like, this is a guy again who was there, who saw it all. New to Cobb. I think Cobb came to the Tigers in 1905, but was in that same era. He pitched for the Cardinals in 1905. Wish Egan did, but was of this, he was there for all of it and was still there all the way through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Or at least 1951, but this is a guy who you never see anything about in any other source. Yeah. And as such, it's important to give this guy a little mention every once in a great while to let, to just give a point of reference for
slide about.
We got a Wish is in 1960, he was inducted to the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame.
Okay.
So, people of his era recognized that, what a force he was in his era, and thus recognized.
So, but you said he was the scout for the East, which included the home field of
and
Michigan,
I would argue that I would
Detroit.
say that was actually his territory, even though he's like he was identified as the head of the everything east of the Mississippi,
right,
and that would go along with somebody who's like basically in Detroit coordinating the efforts of everything going on east of the Mississippi. And also, but the role he filled, I think he was actually, more than just that. I think that he was actually like, Frank Navin's right-hand guy, almost like a general manager to a certain extent, but certainly a right-hand guy. I mean, you got, this is a guy who, like, every one of his major discoveries, I got a list right here. All these guys are Detroiters and Detroit, local legends. You've got, some of these names might not be too familiar, but there's a guy named Roy Cullenbini. This guy, Roy, or maybe it's Roy Cullenbine, but Roy Cullenbine was like, in his day, Roy Cullenbine was a machine. Like this guy, like he was like known for like getting all kinds of walks. Like I think he was with the Tigers in the 1945 World Series. But that guy he was a stud early on. And so Roy Cullenbine, he discovered him. He was a Detroiter. Hal Newhouser, who's a Hall of Fame, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. Right. Dizzy Trout, Jim Bunning, Hoot Evers, Dick Wakefield. Dick Wakefield in his day was like an absolute sensation. Johnny Lepon, Stubby Overmeyer, Art Hauptman, and Barney McCoskey. And they also have, it was at Egan's insistence that the Tigers traded McCoskey for George Kell in 1946. And so, this is a guy. So like that. So all of his biggest name discoveries are guys who were like Detroit local, local Detroit legends. So it stands to wit that, that really if you're talking about scouting territory where he was like the eyes on the baseball games,
right?
Then it really his specific territory was Detroit. And that Navin would leave him to go watch the games and do stuff like this. And then, he would kind of basically run the he would run this, run the scouting departments east of the Mississippi for sure. But his more direct territory was Detroit and in its surrounding, and really Michigan maybe at large. But in any case, a guy who worked with the Tigers from 1910 to 1951, helped choose Lakeland as the Tigers' home, identified some of the biggest, basically every local legend, every guy that is referenced as a player that came from Detroit and played with the Detroit Tigers.
Right.
Those are all his discoveries. So like I say, it stands to wit that this is a guy who had an impact, who had a major role within the Tigers, in Detroit, like his home base was Detroit.
So I find it interesting because Detroit was a pretty integrated city at the time, racially mixed in the north here. People were coming here for jobs like crazy.
We had the Great Migration and all that. Yeah.
So
Joe Louis and them came from Alabama to Detroit.
And out of that, Eddie Tolan moved here very, very young, and Joe Louis moved here very, very young. We talked about Willis Ward being another outstanding football player, and track and football. It's interesting that so Jackie Robinson, the first African American player in the National League, and that was it was 47.
Yeah,
when he got in, the first person of color to play for the Tigers. He was from the Dominican Republic, and what was that cat's name? I just lost him. Where'd he go? So I thought it was interesting that the first person of color but the first African American player was Jake Wood, and that wasn't until 1961.
Yeah,
that's right, yeah. Wild. And then we're talking about Willis Ward, and then Eddie Tolan. We're talking about Eddie Tolan scored 6 touchdowns in a high school football game, right? And then went to Michigan and didn't get to play football. And it's rumored that there was a ban on African Americans in the NFL.
Barrier, yeah,
because no African Americans played in the NFL from 1933 to 1945. There were none.
Yeah.
I thought that was crazy. But the first African American player for the Lions was Wallace Triplett, and that came in 49. So actually, the Lions
pretty early on
we're ahead of the Tigers.
Yeah.
On that. I just thought that was interesting because your base of if Detroit's your market and you're looking at the outstanding athletes in Detroit, some of those African Americans players got passed by because baseball had the Negro League going on, right? And so that was where they got to play, right?
Sure.
So until Jackie started breaking things down and things changed from there. I just thought that was interesting.
Well,
I wondered, how that played into the.
I don't have
scouting.
any direct information or anything like this, but it's like a lot of stuff that involves, I think, human nature and human behavior, which is that there's an industry that does something one way. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're all following, sort of adhering to the way things just kind of are. They're just kind of, you could make a case like a modern day America too.
Yeah. Oh,
if there's any kind of injustices that are out there, you got, the by and large majority of people in the world don't go, I'm going to lead a crusade to make the world a better place. They want to collect their paychecks. Yeah. They want to keep their jobs. They want to do their thing, and they want to just kind of move forward. And, you could make a case that it's, if you're going to say, that was at the time that was the situation was, there wasn't a lot of necessarily racial crusaders that were, it doesn't necessarily mean anybody was a particular racist or something like this.
Well, yeah, no, but I was
the idea that it was just kind of like the way things were, and it's not a defense and it's not anything except for just to say that, that as far as his scouting and development,
no, it was just, as you said, Detroit was his market. I'm like, well, all right, there were some amazing athletes.
No, for sure.
Detroit. And just from
the other side of it too,
what I remember from the story so far, there weren't a lot of African Americans on the baseball teams,
No,
or the football teams, and actually,
and
so
the guys we
were,
talked about, and we just mentioned, there were all football players and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, you didn't
so
hear about
there were
baseball.
none on the professional teams at this time. But when you said he was like scouting this area, I was like, I was like, when did the first African American person of color play for?
Yeah, no,
and I was curious.
Honestly,
so as you were talking, I was looking those things up. I was like, that's interesting. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I couldn't recollect off the top of my head either, but that it was Jake Wood in that. In either case,
I just thought it was interesting. It's like when did this unfold? When did these things?
Yeah, well, and then the other side of it too is that as the affiliate system was built too, is that the affiliate system itself was built without black players, African Americans factored into the equation,
right?
And so if that's the pipeline system, and they're not part of that sort of pipeline system where they're getting signed and put into the lower levels of the minor leagues to work their way up the chain, then they're off the radar altogether. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you kind of say that's where if they're not getting included into that system either, then they're. Because even Jackie Robinson, he didn't just go right to the Brooklyn Dodgers. He went to the minor leagues first. He's just a special all-world, just multi-talented athlete that went to, that they signed him, and he actually went to Montreal first.
Yeah.
And then from Montreal, he demonstrated his ability at the minor leagues and was so good that they're like, yeah, well, this is an opportunity
this guy just
bring him in.
Play.
Yeah.
Get this guy playing. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I was just as we were talking about that, and I was like, so what the face of scouting at the time, what it was like, and what it led to. So
yeah, well, no, that was the world. Even the U.S. Army, all the way through the 1940s, all the way through World War II was segregated and everything. So
yeah.
So it wasn't just like baseball; it was like the world at large.
Yep. I just thought it was interesting. I wanted to look at that, just trying to look at those dates as we were talking.
Yeah, no, it's a good refresher because I forgot what year the first Tiger black player was. So.
Yeah. So it's a little later than I thought it would have been.
But in any case, the entire, with the development for all of its positives and negatives, the development of the Tigers, a major role in the development of this franchise, was Wish Egan, for good or ill. And so, and I'll just I got a couple quotes here I can spit out real quick to kind of frame a reference around them a little bit. So there's a quote right here I have in my book from Francis Stan, who was a Baseball Digest writer from July 1951. And so obviously he's kind of talking about 1951 is when Wish Egan passed. So this is most likely some kind of like a remembrance or sort of a tribute to him. But he said he used to descend into mine shafts to talk to fathers of boys who couldn't sign contracts because they were underage. He's been known to time a visit to a youngster's home while school is still in session and wipe dishes for the mother awaiting the boy's return. Parents are often underrated people, Wish philosophized on occasion. I liked him on my side. So that's one sort of quote about Wish Egan climbing down into mine shafts, which is a novel approach to looking for, to talk to a father in that.
Yeah.
And so then here's one for talking about how Wish Egan in Detroit. Mm-hmm. So it says Egan's Sandlot finds play in minor loops. So this is from September 23rd, 1934 from the Detroit Times. And it says, Wish Egan, the gray fox who scouts for the Tigers hereabouts, is determined to find himself a local boy who can make good with the Tigers. Wish bids fair to becoming the chief rival of Eddie Goosetree, who we're going to talk about on the next show. Wish bids fair to becoming the chief rival of Eddie Goosetree, discoverer of Schoolboy Row and others, as the leading ivory hunter for the Tigers. The soft-spoken Wish, however, has limited himself to the sandlots of Detroit and around the state. Never a Sunday goes by that Egan isn't sitting on the players' bench or high in the stands at some amateur game in the vicinity. The majority of the local sandlot activity centers on Northwestern Field, and that's where you may find Egan. So all know, it says the headline of this next passage is all know Wish. All of the sandlotters, from the youngsters in Class E to the more seasoned players in AAA, know Wish by sight. The old-timers call him by his first name, and Wish is Mr. Egan to the youngsters. On several occasions during the Sandlot season, Wish has been talking to likely looking prospects between innings, giving them a few helpful hints. So he even said right there that Wish's territory is Michigan and Detroit. That's where he that's his direct scouting territory, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would be reporting back to Frank Navin and coordinating all the activities east of the Mississippi. On top of that,
Yeah. Right on. Cool, man. So more scouting history coming up.
Yeah,
next.
and we mentioned right there Eddie Goosetree. And Eddie Goosetree is a beast. I mean, this is the guy that discovered Schoolboy Row. And this Discovery School, we'll even go into Schoolboy Row's discovery story because it's amazing.
All right.
Because Schoolboy Row was like just one of the, I mean, Schoolboy Row would like when they discovered the Schoolboy, like the reason, like Schoolboy Row was he's a teenager pitching to adults.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, so they're that's, his discovery of Schoolboy Row and the way he signed him, everything is fantastic story. And so we have a good one for the next.
There we go.
Show.
Looking forward to the next one.
Eddie Goosetree.
Right on. All right. So there you go. So like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those podcast things and all the podcast places, DetroitCityOfChampions.com. That's the website, a good place to get connected with the books and merch and tintypes and plaster of Paris busts of Charles.
They got those up there. On my side, I have them. I do my own plaster of Paris bust of me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just making crap up.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't be opposed to it if we had a market for it. I'll sell whatever we want.
There you go. All right, but yeah. So thanks for being with us. Truly appreciate you being there, and we'll do it again very, very soon. It's Detroit City of Champions podcast.